Clive, you're someone who understands a lot about natural habitats. Why is it important for humans to have a natural habitat, or at least a healthy habitat amongst themselves?
Um, Understanding about habitat or about natural systems is something that is unreachable. I think it what I have is a huge curiosity about it, because the more it's one of those things that the more you kind of learn about, the more you don't understand, or the more you realize you don't understand. But I suppose the thing I feel is the closer we get to working and living within natural cycles. And that's not living in a tent in the woods or anything, but just thinking in a way that it aligns with the natural world. The more sustainable we are as humans in the future, I think. And on loads of levels, like for our own general health and well-being, we are of nature. So the closer we align with nature, the easier life will be, I think.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Well, Clive, your name is Clive Bright. You have a passion for nature and for designing a future where farming can play a central role in restoring biodiversity and ecological function to our landscape. You raise 100% pasture-fed organic livestock, cows specifically, on your 120-acre farm in County Sligo. You sell your finished beef directly to the consumer under your own brand, Rare Ruminair.
Yep.
I pronounced that right. You practice holistic planned grazing to ensure the pastures are given time to fully recover between grazing events. This strengthens the pasture, increases diversity, and improves and protects the soil, which allows for a more extended grazing season. This has helped you achieve grazing all year round. You're now establishing various silvopasture systems across your farm to harness the functional benefits trees can have on the landscape and your enterprise. You're a working artist, illustrator, and designer, and your creative work is inspired by your ecological curiosity. Clive is a proud ambassador for Farming of Nature, has worked for the Organic Trust, is on the steering group of the National Organic Training SkillNet, also known as NOTS, and is a founding member of the Irish Agroforestry Forum. Welcome, Clive. Pleasure to have you.
Oh yeah, we're delighted to be here.
Good.
Yeah.
So we talked about natural systems, natural habitats, and why it's relevant to not just the farming land but ourselves. And I think personally, I feel like I do agree, the closer we are to nature, the natural cycles, the healthier it is for us. But I think a lot of people may not see that connection or may not understand. So how do you kind of bring it to Joe Soap who walks down the street?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because you can get really conceptual and pretentious about it if you want. But the way I've come to start thinking more about this myself is through my farming practice, I suppose. And I came upon a small kind of eureka moment where I realized that the animals we farm, or farmed animals or livestock, they come from nature as well. It's obvious enough, but we treat them as livestock, and a lot of the systems we operate within farming are based around our own convenience or production or stuff, and they're not that holistic. So they're like maybe pigs or poultry systems are the extreme, where we've hacked the animals to live in a situation where they're completely divorced from their natural environment, but they're very productive for us. So that's an extreme example. And the more, like, we think of habitat, it sits very well if we're talking about the habitat of butterfly or beetle or a bird or something. It's very a nature word. But if you think of a livestock species in terms of habitat, it's a different thing. You're like, oh, so where do cows naturally come from, or what's their natural environment? And I started trying to piece that together within the farming system, and making the farm more like what I think a natural habitat for a cow is. And as the more I started to do that, the easier the whole farming system got. The less welfare issues there were, the less illness there was, and all these kind of things. But that same thing, then, that same idea can be put on humans too. Humans are a natural part of nature, and we have a natural habitat. And I'm not saying we need to live in the woods and stuff like that, but it's about trying to explore and understand and acknowledge natural cycles and think about everything we do in terms of those. And it's fundamental in many ways. It's like things like the water cycle and things like, and it's almost, we only need to understand them at the level of junior cert science, that the way rain falls and infiltrates into the ground and evaporates or goes into rivers and seas and all those kind of things. But rather than it being an abstract thing in a textbook, it's more about how it applies in everyday living in the world. And it's very relevant in farming because water cycles are very, like if there's floods, like there's at the moment, there's loads of heavy rain and farmers are giving out that they can't operate on the land and land is saturated and all those kind of things. But if we understand water cycles and how they operate within the landscape and we make decisions around those, then we make better decisions to deal with those situations. And one of the key ideas in natural processes is that diversity brings resilience. And a lot of the decisions we make in life and in farming and in nature restoration even are all about simplicity. Are simplifying systems, are striving to kind of very reductionist goals. Like we want to save the corncrake, so we'll focus completely on saving the corncrake rather than the whole habitat and why they're gone, and all the nuances that just thinking in wholes and bigger pictures all the time can help us make better decisions.
So is it like we're thinking on the end result first rather than
that's one way to look at it. But I think a better way, or not kind of a different angle, is to, like, I've found it really useful. Like I love trees, for example, and when you start to think about things in tree time, which is a completely different concept, because as humans we think in human time, and because culturally, I suppose, we feel like we're at the center of the universe and we're the most important species, and this just happens. Everything is within generational time, or days, or years, or life, and we ponder over things in that time frame, and we tend to make decisions on that rather than thinking if you step back further and think like over many generations, or over thousands of years, or over tree time, or if you're managing the landscape for trees cycling, for example, then you're thinking on this huge plane, and you're thinking if you do that into the future, then you're envisioning the landscape 500 years in the future, and what it's going to be like for my own generation of people, or humanity in general. And that's, to think like that is a lot more beneficial for the whole world, because if you're thinking about the resilience of the world and that far ahead, and you're making decisions based on what that vision is like, then you're going to make better decisions, I think.
Okay, so you talked about thinking in tree time. So it sounds like you're thinking in hundreds of years.
Sometimes, yeah. But
what's that like?
Not all the time. I look around.
But I'm curious. What's it like thinking like that? I've never thought like that before.
It doesn't matter the number of time. It's about just projecting, I suppose. It's where that came from in many ways was in holistic management, which is part of kind of holistic management was developed by a guy called Alan Savory, and it's a framework of decision making, and it does a lot. It's very land based, and I suppose it spawned out of management of land and animals and things, but it's a bigger picture thing now, and a lot of the foundation of holistic management is that you're planning, or you're managing for this kind of future thing, and it's just that it's called a holistic context. So you're thinking in a really broad thing of, like, people, nature, landscape, everything, and how you envision the future to be, or how you want the future to be. And, like, there are fundamental things really, but they're just to get you thinking, like you're going to want security, and you're going to want comfort, and you're going to want probably some sort of a prosperity, and what does the landscape look like for that to happen? And you think about those ideas in your own context, in your own place, in your own environment, and they're universal wants, I guess. And a lot of them just come back to like things like clean water, or things like clean air, abundant beauty in nature, and kind of broad things. And then you can bring that really quickly back to how is what I'm doing right now, is like this simple decision of I don't know, digging a pond, or planting a hedge, or pulling out a hedge, or making it feel bigger, or anything, going to the shop to buy a bagel. Is that a step towards this envisioned future? And that is abstract. Like, it's a weird thing to think about. So, like, if I do this, is that going to make things better 500 years in time? And it can be anything, any decision. It can be, should I buy this tractor?
Mm-hmm.
Or
so does it play into a lot of the decisions that are including buying a tractor?
Yeah.
Does
yeah.
it?
And not all the time. I forget to do it all the time, because I'm human and I make rash decisions. But if you're to make a decision that's actually holistic and actually rounded on lots of stuff, how is it going to affect other people around me, and how is it going to just affect the broader life? It can be a very good way to go, yeah, that's a good idea, that's a bad idea, or that's getting me closer to where I want it to be. Or, like, one of the things is that you kind of, in holistic management, is you kind of synthesize that big idea into your own place, or your own goals. And my current goals are to create a perpetual farming system, a farming system that'll operate on its own. Because, like, often, like, and it's a cool thing to think about, because a lot of the measures or decisions you make on a farm, if you weren't there, what would happen? That, so if I plant this here, right, plant a hedge there, if I am not there, or if I stop managing that, what's going to happen? That and that's a really, like, you go, oh, that'll just grow and it'll be natural, it'll be fine. Or that's going to invade the whole field. And, they're different things. And it's a real cool way to figure stuff out and go, this is actually working towards that goal of a stable, balanced future, or it's not.
Yeah. I resonate trying every time I'm not saying every time, but I do think is this a step towards, maybe a better future for humanity. But even simple things like myself too, like buying things, or buying clothes, or like, is this the right thing, Yeah. And it's hard to do it in everything, because I also don't feel like we're there. But I'm conscious of it. But I don't think a lot of people are. But I think, and when you're talking about that, how conscious are farmers in Ireland, or in the world for that matter? How many are like you, or have that approach, or is it just that? that
I
age needs to come down? Or
Yeah, I think humans in general like don't think in a broader term, and I'm not saying I'm special because I do or anything, but it's just a way I've found that I'm really content operating in life. But I think I think a lot of it's cultural, but it's happened for thousands of years. You know, people like look at the rise and fall of empires and all that kind of stuff. Like they're always down to uh, people making singular goal decisions. You know, they're if people were thinking holistically all the time, they'd all be sound. You know, and bad stuff wouldn't happen that much.
yeah,
Whereas, you know, if your singular goal is to be Genghis Khan, then you're going to rape and pillage and burn land all over the place without any kind of you don't care about the consequences because your single goal is to be bigger and powerful, or you know, and that's not a very holistic decision. And some people do grand like that, but there's loads of fallout.
yeah,
And like, I suppose the thing that anchors all of this thought is that it's really simple ecological processes. You can bring it back to that. You can bring it back to going, is this good for diversity? And it doesn't have to be diversity of plants or nature or anything. It has to be diversity of everything. I think diversity is the resilience thing that is going to pull anything through, because even if it's diversity in bakeries, right? So I think it's important to have the big bakery that makes shit bread and, you know, feeds loads of people, because there's a place for that. And it's really important to have local bakeries that, you know, grind flour with their elbows and, you know, do really extreme things and make a really special product. And I think it's important that things aren't just simplified all the time. So it's not just the big bakery making shit bread, but there's loads of stuff and loads of different levels economically, and that there's choice for different kind of people in different situations. And, you know, it just goes across everything. And even in the way we manage landscapes, like the way I'm managing my farm and hope to in the future, I find it really exciting, and I think it's going to be really cool, and it's going to work really well, and it's going to increase diversity throughout my lifetime. I think it's going to be perpetual. But at the same time, I think it's important that there's farmers farming in other ways, and I think it's important that there's people trying to rewild. And I think there's, you know, I think the diversity in landscape management is vital, because if we do it all one way, then it's just one way and there's no diversity. So it happens on every level, I think.
Would you say that your farming method is actually easier and simpler than what, I mean, the traditional Irish farmer would be doing?
Yeah.
More cost effective?
Very, yeah.
More?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. For the amount of labor input and any sort of input, what I found is really it's really exciting, because I took over the family farm, and it was a dairy farm running in an 80s model, because my dad passed away when I was young, and it was run kind of loyally by a workman for years, and he kept it nostalgically, and because he didn't really have he didn't feel like he had the agency to make big changes, so he just kept it loyally in the way it was left. So when I inherited in 2002 or 3,
What age were you at the time?
I was finished university and stuff. God, I don't know, 22 or something.
Yeah. So you would have worked through the farm anyways.
Yeah, a good
with
bit, and various amounts of interest in it. Like when I was young, I was fairly disinterested on lots of levels. I think partly I didn't really like the system, and partly I've no interest in machinery, so I don't like machinery things. And
Why is it that you didn't like machinery?
I just don't have a grow for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just kind of like the letting the animals about, walking about kind of
Yeah,
approach?
well, I didn't even think that was an option. I didn't understand that was an option when I was small.
Mm.
But I was drawn to like, you know, finding frogs
Yes.
in a pool or something and wandering off like
I
to
think we all were. I
yeah,
mean,
no,
Jesus,
I
I
know,
mean, out
but
trying to catch frogs, like,
I suppose as farming went and my perception of farming as a young fella, I was like, nah, that's no interest in that.
mm,
But it just the way things landed with family and everything else, I kind of ended up with the farm, and I ended up, I suppose, as I matured into it, I kind of realized that I wasn't. I remember having this kind of moment where I realized I wasn't actually inheriting this. I was inheriting this opportunity.
mm-hmm.
So the farming system is the obvious thing you think you're inheriting, but you're inheriting a piece of land you can do anything with.
Yes.
And it was that really excited me.
Realization, like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, and it was just like, oh, like I can actually potentially, we could build an airport here.
Mm.
Not that I wanted to, but it was just that if you wanted to think as broadly as you can, this is an endless opportunity. And so then I started to slowly shift the farm towards being organic and other things like that. And I took baby steps. And
How did you how were you aware of that?
yeah, that's a weird one, because
that's
I
a
don't
bit of
actually
time ago
know.
too.
But I remember a couple of things, like when I was 12, I remember going to the local library and asking for books on organic. And they were kind of like, no, we've nothing like that here, but we'll order something in. And they ordered this kind of tome of a thing and I since met the author, Nicholas Lampkin. And it was like the Bible of organic farming at the time, and it was in the 80s, and the organic movement was really young. Like you think of,
Yeah, but how did you even know that was even a
I
word?
don't
Do you know
know.
what I
I
mean?
don't know whether it was
I
an
mean, I only
article
learned
in
that a few years ago.
yeah, I know. I cannot identify the start, whether it was something on telly
Hmm.
or something that triggered something in me, just a more natural way of doing things, or an article in the paper or something like that. But I remember getting this book, and the book was like academic. I was way beyond me. But I remember having it for a while, flicking through it and giving it back to the library. And the next big step was I met this guy. I was in hospital getting my appendix out, and it was during my leaving cert mocks, I think. I might have been actually my leaving cert. Anyway, I met this amazing guy called Erwin Springburn, right? And I was gearing up to go to art college at this time, and we were going to bed in the ward. I have the strongest memory of it since. He was just a wonderful man, but he was in the diagonal opposite bed to me, and I remember we just spotted each other. I think we just liked the look of each other.
Yeah.
And I was listening to music, and he had his earphones, these like 80s fluffy headed earphones on. They were really funny. And the nurse came in to put us all to bed, and she was giving out about us listening to music, just laughing. And for some reason, I took my tape out and gave it to him. And he gave me his one. His one was Mozart, and mine was Johnny Cash. And he thumbs up me, and I thumbs up him. And after the lights went out, I went over, give him his tape back, and sat down. And we just started chatting. Complete random meeting. And he was a Swiss-trained goldsmith, German guy. And he'd spent 12 years doing an apprenticeship, being a goldsmith. And he'd retired his life in Switzerland and moved to Ireland and bought a small holding in French Park in Roscommon, and was living off the fat of the land, like John Seymour, like self-sufficient kind of thing. And this blew my mind. This was like, this is the life I want, because I had these rumblings in the back of my head, but they were all, I'd never met anyone. I'd never seen a working example. So this guy was a creative person living a farming rural life, and this was what I had kind of envisioned. And so we very quickly gravitated very tightly towards each other. We spent all night talking. I went to bed at like 6 a.m.
Jesus.
And he was in there
Late night class
for an infected bee sting or something, so he wasn't very sick or anything. But we had it was life changing. And
He was an older man, I assume.
he was
Yeah.
like
So
18.
you were age what time?
18 maybe. Yeah. And he was an organic farmer. So he was the first real organic person I'd met, and we talked about. So I was aware of the concepts, and we talked about it for ages. And it was a concrete example of everything I had notions about were possible, even though I probably would have blundered into them anyway, because I just kind of seemed to, I don't know, it just seemed to have gone through life kind of going, I might try it anyway, that kind of notion. And but he kind of fast tracked all my thinking. So I went to art college, enjoyed art college, it was fantastic, and came back to the farm and had stayed in touch with Erwin and seen his process. My biggest hang up initially was he was farming 25 acres, and he had this real intense homesteady kind of setup where he was growing vegetables, and he had loads of chickens, and he had an orchard, and like the whole operation was small enough to be kind of heavily managed in a nice way. It wasn't like but his output of stuff was relative to the input of his work, and it was very cyclical, and his hen manure was like fertilizing his veggie garden and all that kind of stuff, and it was just so cool. And my biggest problem when I moved home is I had 120 acres to deal with. How the hell am I going to do that and that? And it took me ages to formulate a way to. His model just wouldn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no other examples, and I was so focused on him, it took me ages to break that apart. That's how I found holistic management. Mm-hmm. That was there was loads of stuff within holistic management, holistic plant grazing, and all sorts of things that helped me spread things out and think about things and organize things in a bigger way.
Is holistic management kind of sneered upon, like in Ireland, by farmers? I've mentioned it to a few.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like there's like a block there. You need your hedges might not be as neat and tidy, and you might not have as good a grass and stuff like this here.
Yeah, it's a totally different way of processing information, even, and making decisions. And most people misunderstand it as being a set of measures or things you do, whereas it's really a decision for people to think about. Because even, especially, or maybe in every industry, but in the farming industry, we've been culturally shaped not to make decisions for ourselves. So we've been culturally shaped to take advice, and it's kind of blanket advice. Like, if you have a field with rushes in it, you spray this spray on it. These kind of things. They're always formulaic actions to solve a problem, rather than thinking, whereas the holistic management approach might be first figure out the root cause of that problem. So why are the rushes there? And the first thing you do is stop doing the things that are causing the rushes.
And then that's kind of relative to humans too. If we get an illness or sick, it's like go to the doctor, treat the symptom as opposed to the cause.
The root cause.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, that's a big thing, and that's why it's not holistic management isn't about farming. It's about making decisions about life. And when you start talking like that just to someone, they're like, not interested, because it takes a lot of headspace to shift your thinking.
You have to be open to it.
Yeah,
but I think there's also that that's a bit mad.
Yeah, there's a bit of woo-woo.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's already tangible. But it takes a bit of kind of study almost to get your head into it, and then realize its relevance to your life or your system or your farm or your anything. And like there's because it was spawned out of a way to manage landscapes, mostly with farmed animals, and it spawned out of work that was done mostly in Africa. like a lot of people, when they learn the history of it and are working through that, they're like, none of this is relative to me. Like so there's a lot of hurdle to get across before you actually kind of get it properly. And like I did online training in it with a kind of, there's a company called 3LM who do training in holistic management, and there was maybe, I think, 12 different farmers that were handpicked that were like cutting edge kind of regenerative organic farmers around the country to do this course, because there was loads of interest in it and stuff. And even those people who are thinking so laterally and being really clever and amazing farmers, amazing growers and everything else, I think I'm the only one that really pursued it properly within that small group. And some people did it and understood it a little bit and were interested in it, but didn't really, were like, oh yeah, I kind of get where that's coming from. I don't see how it is anything to me. Or some people, it was kind of evident they were very prescriptive in their approach to things. So if, like, again, back to the rush thing, if they had rushes, they had a process to get rid of those. So if somebody wanted to know how you get rid of rushes, you won't be told in holistic management. You'll be taught how to make that decision for yourself in your context, which is, that's a load of big words that like you just shut down.
But also, I think there needs to be there's a thought process. So it's kind of a bit more work.
Yeah.
And maybe people want the simpler way out.
Well, like if you want to solve your rush problem, you want an answer to your rush problem. You don't want to spend 3 months studying to figure out a way that I can answer that question for myself. But the benefit is that 3-month study can relate to everything. So you learn how to make broader decisions all the time about anything.
It bleeds into your personal life. Is that what you're kind of
saying?
Totally.
Yeah. And you be like, that's, and I suppose why it resonated so much with me is I had these notions about thinking in tree time, and I had these kind of things, and I could never. There were always floating ideas that were bouncing around that I never really, like. They'd be useful sometimes. I'd be like trying to figure something out, and I'd take a step back and just go, oh, this isn't actually that big a deal, because in the grand scheme of things, and it could be anything. But when I kind of studied holistic management a bit more, there was a place for all these notions I was having, and a kind of a framework, and that's essentially what it says it is. It's a framework for decision making. So it became this way where I could approach problems in a similar broad thinking way over and over again, and it's cool. Yeah,
it sounds interesting. But you're also like, when you're talking, I'm thinking, because you're quite creative, you're an artist as well. It's not rare. It is rare, but it's not common to meet someone. For me, a farmer who's quite artistic and creative. Maybe there's more like that, but it feels like you're in touch with your imagination, your creativity, which obviously helps with the work that you do, the holistic management.
Yeah.
You create space for that,
Yeah. It seems to feed in different ways. I've been thinking about it quite a bit with this podcast coming. And I when I was in our college and I had to do a thesis at the end, I knew what I wanted to write the thesis about. I didn't actually end up writing the thesis about it, but I knew what it was in my head, but I couldn't pull it together. And I remember talking to the tutor he was the tutor in aesthetics. That was his, and he was like this real kind of, he was like, you could imagine him wearing Greek robes. It's real philosophical. It real, and it was very hard to make any sense of what he was telling you. And it was always way over my head. And I was having too much crack in our college to really utilize him. But I remember when it came to doing my thesis, I was really keen to do something on the aesthetics of the landscape. And he said, no, this, and I ended up doing something boring about it. It was interesting in one way because I got to explore 3 or 4 different artists doing different stuff with the land. But it wasn't actually what I was interested in. I was trying to grasp at something about aesthetics and about landscape and how we perceive landscape. But I hadn't done enough in my head thinking to articulate it to him, and he just said, no, we'll do something else. But this idea of the landscape and how it looks is a really interesting one to me now, because a lot of it, like things like the way we've traditionally started to manage the landscape, and some of those traditions are born in wisdom and of observation of nature, and this is the way stuff happens. And some of it's nostalgic tradition within family that happened just because it happened once and we do it that way now, and it has no bearing on any kind of reasoning. And I find tradition a really interesting subject because it's very ingrained in us, like, and it's tied up with nostalgia. But the reason tradition is a thing is because it embodies wisdom. And I think we presume that it always embodies wisdom. And it's been a recent realization that it doesn't. And people go, oh, yeah, we need to listen to the old farmers and the way they did things and stuff like that. And yes, that's true. But we also need to test them and question them. It's not, this is the way we do things. Just keep doing it.
So, like, when you talk about tradition, that would be more than likely generation passed down from to next to next to next, and they just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah,
and to change that might be, it's a big deal.
Yeah,
you're breaking tradition.
Yeah, or even just emotionally.
Yeah,
you know that. Why do you do it that way? It's just this is the way we've always done it, without questioning it, without get into the root wisdom within that tradition, and then making decisions within your context based on that wisdom rather than just mindlessly following the tradition.
Yeah. But I think when you break tradition, then there's that, you might be insulting the family.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe there's other ways that can be better.
Totally.
But more beneficial.
But I think the key thing there is finding the root reason behind the wisdom in it.
Yeah.
And if it's that case, then if you understand we do it that way because, then you can go, I'm going to do it this way because it does the same thing. That's the root wisdom within the tradition, rather than just doing it this way and that doesn't fit into today's context.
So it's like, well, why?
Yeah.
Asking.
It's just get into the root cause of things.
Yes.
Yeah, or the root reason.
Yes. You talked about questioning convention, but you had to break the tradition as well because you had that with your farm.
Yeah, but it was actually quite interesting because although the farming system that I took from that I inherited from my dad and that was preserved by the workman, he was an innovator too. So my dad was, and so was my granddad. And like my granddad had, like at the time it was like the early 1900s. So he was farming a very mixed farm. There was ploughing done with horses, and he was a big horseman. And then when my dad took over, it was about it was a progressive type of modern farming. We had first slatted shed in the area, and they're all stuff I've decommissioned. But it was about being efficient and being productive, and it was a very small dairy farm. We were only milking 30 cows or that kind of thing. So it was within, compared to kind of modern dairy today, it was within the ecological bounds of the farm. It wasn't crazy, but it was very, he was embracing technology and modern stuff. Like we electric fences and, the cool stuff that was just coming out. And he wasn't afraid to innovate and use those things. So like, if you were to take that as the tradition rather than the system as the tradition, then I didn't break any tradition. I just followed on.
Yes.
Being innovative.
Yes.
and just being innovative in a different direction.
You talked about decommissioning the sheds.
Yeah.
Why? Do you not no need for?
It depends. It depends on your context and what you're doing. But
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff was me just being grumpy about stuff. One of the primary ways to store kind of house cattle in the wintertime is to use a slatted shed. So there's slats on the floor, and the cattle all stay in pins, and they eat their feed outside those pins. And as they dung, and it falls down into a tank underneath through a slotted floor, right? And all this waste is called slurry, and it ferments in those tanks. So kind of denatures from the natural way. So this kind of fermented anaerobic material, and then that's spread out on the land. It's really high in nutrients, and it grows loads of grass. The downside of it is that the fermentation process makes it really acidic, and it changes the biology in that from being anaerobic, kind of the natural stuff that comes out of the cow, and it changes the profile of the biology of that. And when you're spreading out on land, it's actually can be quite detrimental to soil, because they're not. It's no longer symbiotic with soil structure and soil biology. So slurry can make soil very compacted. It can, if it's put on at too high rates, it can be detrimental to the biology that's in the soil, because it kind of smothers it. And it changes the pH of the soil to being more acidic. And I didn't like all those things, but it stinks. It's horrible for all the neighbors around. You're spreading slurry. I used to text all my neighbors and tell them, make sure you haven't any washing on the line, which was a nice thing to do, I think. But like now, we don't have any slurry on the farm currently, and hope never to have again. But anytime we're going for lighting a barbecue in summertime, it's the ideal time for spreading slurry. Also, you're just like, just put out the barbecue and we'll eat inside, because everywhere stinks, you know.
Yeah.
And so socially, it's horrible as well. But it's a really efficient way to house cattle in the wintertime. It's a really efficient, kind of relatively simple way to process all that waste, and it's called waste, even though like it's the core of fertility. Well, it should be the core of fertility on the farm. And so it's kind of, you're reducing this the nutrient cycle of the grass being consumed by the animals and dunged out, and you're reducing that in quality or in functionality within a natural cycle. So I just don't like it at all. That's why we decommissioned the slurry shed, or the slatted shed. And we had then in organic systems, they promote using a dry bedded shed. So you're bedding out your shed with straw or some other dry material like wood chip, or and then the animals are on that, and then that, when they dung and urine on that, it breaks down and you can make it into kind of compost, which is a good process in many ways. It's different to the natural cycle. You're slightly breaking the cycle, of course, but you're creating a material that's way higher in value to the soil and the general thing of the farm. But the process involved in doing that, for instance, in Sligo, if I'm buying straw, it's been trucked all the way up the country. To me, it's really expensive, because there's very little arable or grain production in Sligo. So all the straw, which is the waste material from grain, or the stalks of a grain crop, is trucked up here, and it's used as the bedding, and that's fine. It's great, and chemically and biologically it works really well. But the work involved and the logistics of moving that, and then having to process that and turn that over and turn it into compost, it's all very energy and work intensive. And that kind of annoyed me, because I'm essentially a lazy kind of farmer.
Lazy or lean?
I think it's lazy. Yeah. Yeah. So essentially what I've tended to do is move the farm towards stuff anything that's hard work or was a pain in the arse, I kind of tried to design it out of the system. And so I'd had this notion of, with the idea of habitat again, of establishing a habitat on the farm that was closer to a natural habitat for the livestock, then maybe I don't need to house them. So and with part of holistic management is a thing called holistic planned grazing, and it's going back to all those natural processes and working within the natural cycles of even grass growth and all those kind of things, and utilizing and maximizing those in a very holistic way. Like, one of most farmers, the key thing they're trying to do is produce as much grass as possible at a high quality, high protein level, so it puts a lot of just the animals grow quick, right? So it's like really good quality feed. But the downside of growing just grass like that, which is like early vegetative grass that's really high in kind of protein value or high in sugars and everything else,
Is this like fertilizer fed grass?
It can be, or it doesn't need to be. But typically in a very modern high production system, it is.
Yeah.
But you can do the same thing in an organic setup, right? But so you're focusing on this window of grass, but that's only one. All the grass is the same age. You're grazing it at all the same time. And it's a simplification of the grass's life cycle. So it leaves the grass and your system very vulnerable. So if you have a really cold spell in the middle of the summer, that grass stops growing. If you have a hard frost, freaky frost, it wipes it all out. If you go into the later part of the year with only that type of grass, once it's grazed out, it's gone. It's got no staying power. It's got no resilience. Whereas if the way I manage my grass is to embrace the chaos and try and have grasses at all different life stages within the pasture at all times. So we graze it in such a way that happens. So when it comes to wintertime, we have grass that's knee deep with some really nice vegetative grass protected by some older stands of grass. And then we graze through that in the wintertime and basically bring everything back to zero. So that's our kind of cleaning cycle over the winter. So we ration out that essentially over the winter and don't house the animals at all anymore. And I did that for a little while also feeding stored grass like silage and hay. I'd feed them that in the field, or roll out bales of hay and roll out bales of straw. And then I said, well, what if I balance my stocking rate and pull back the amount of animals I produce and just feed them the standing grass? You work really hard and manage really carefully the grass during the life cycle of the grass in the summertime, but just feed them that stockpile and don't cut any silage or don't preserve any, and see if that works. And it does. And it's been really enlightening and eye-opening in many ways, because a lot of people would say, "Oh, my ground's too wet for that." And if you're managing your grass like this in this tiny window of the grass life cycle, it will be, because the roots are going to be tiny and you're not going to have enough soil structure to withstand cattle walking over the land in winter. But we kind of try to promote what most farmers call a dirty butt, which is like, it's kind of, it sounds awful, but it's like the base of old grass kind of rotting or building up, or you're building up this cover. Ecologically, it's called a litter layer, which is kind of dead grasses covering the soil or protecting the soil. And like, traditionally, that's what a grass harrow is for. You scrape that across the ground to rake out all the dead grass, so you're leaving light to get in and let the new grass grow. But winter grazing does that. It'll clear out all the dirty butt, but you need the dirty butt of grass to hold up the animals in the wintertime. You have this mat of kind of old or dying or dead grasses protecting the soil layer on the top. All the grass is growing up through that, and they're grazing that. But you have this big root structure underneath, so you have a really kind of resilient system. and it holds up against grass because or holds up against heavy rain because you've got the soil isn't hitting the rain isn't hitting the soil or capping it because it's protected by this litter layer, and it infiltrates nice and slowly into the soil and deep down into the soil because there's lots of roots there. And if there's a drought or a very dry period, again, the soil is protected from evaporation. The roots are deeper down into the water, and there's a lot more water stored in a functional way in the soil. It's not waterlogged, but you have moist soil really deep down, right? Yes. That's infiltrating water. And all that is resilience. But that resilience is coming because of diversity. It's diversity of plant types, but it's also diversity of plants at different stages of their life cycle rather than in this very simple, short window.
Okay, so what's the knock-on effect to the animal and to the human? Like, the end result is humans, it's food. So how do we benefit from that?
Well, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not going to rant on that my beef is way more nutrient profile, but it does.
Yes.
You know, like,
well, I mean, it makes sense
logically.
If you think like that.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is based on that logic rather than I've read 100 science papers. But like, if an animal, if you think of just say one singular grass plant, when it sticks its head up, it's starting to photosynthesize, is doing various things as a profile of sugars and different elements in that grass, right? And they may be really good for putting on weight and putting on muscle and whatever. That's fine. But if that grass grows to a different stage, it's going to have a different profile of nutrients within it for all sorts of reasons within the plant's life cycle and whatnot. And if it goes to seed again, same thing happens. A lot of the nutrients go into the seed head, and the husk of the grass becomes mostly fiber. But fiber is a primary requirement of anyone's diet or any animal's diet. And a lot of modern farming systems basically have no fiber in the diet, or very little, you know. And a lot of the, like, just as a tiny working example that maybe other farmers could relate to, is in the back end or the autumn time of the year, you often get another flush of grass, nice leafy green grass, but it's kind of watery old grass. What be described, it's kind of after grass. So it's been either harvested hard or grazed hard during the summertime. And the last flush of grass, there's usually a lot of rain, but there's a good bit of light, and you get this kind of very vigorous but kind of watery, soft old grass. And it's very good. Animals will thrive on it, but they'll often, if that's all they're eating, you'll find that their manure is very loose. You wouldn't want to be standing behind them that way. And dairy farmers, for example, would routinely, just to balance their animals' diet, and they're in such high production systems, would routinely feed straw with that. So they'd roll out bales of straw. And straw is what I use for bedding. So it's just pure fiber. And the cattle will go mad if the fiber is available, they'll go mad for it. Like, they'll just consume it up. But they've spent the whole year trying to promote this high protein leafy grass, where what I spend the whole year providing both, you know. So there's always roughage and fiber in our pastures. So we don't need to include straw because you're creating a more balanced diet all around. Other things we try to do, like slightly tangential, but the same idea, is that the diversity within the landscape, and even within a pasture or square foot of pasture, the more different leaf shapes, the more different types of leaves at different stages, the more that area photosynthesizes. And photosynthesizing plants are what is the cycle of energy in all of the world. You know, like coal and oil and everything comes from photosynthesis at some stage. So the more we can photosynthesize anywhere in the world, the more things are good. You know, the more things are cycling, the more energy from the sun is being fed into the ground. And, you know, so like if we strip back everything I've said today, if we photosynthesize or if we focus on photosynthesization, just that cycle happening more and more, the better things are. So you could even question any decision going, is this cause more more of that or less of that? So on the farm, what we've tried to do, or what we're trying to do going forward, is maximize that. So within the pastures, we're planting lots of trees and introducing what's kind of academically called agroforestry. So you're adding trees within a system where cattle are grazing. Silvopastures, in other words, so silvos, trees and pastures. So you're mixing that and creating this kind of woodland pasture environment, which is like it's closer to a natural habitat for the cattle, which is what we're all about, but it also increases the profile of plants in that area. So you're now getting the pasture plants, which are photosynthesizing on this level, and then you're getting a tree canopy that's photosynthesizing at the top level. So under the soil, then you have massive different root profile that's doing loads of different things at different levels, and it's just creating more diversity and more abundance and more resilience. And so that's what, when I said we're trying to create a more perpetual farm, that's what I'm talking about. Just this farm that has so much stuff going on. You're kind of embracing that chaos, trying to get rid of that aesthetic that we've developed of neatness, like this idea of like humans love neat things. They love lawns, love neatly clipped hedges. But when you have this chaos, there's so much resilience in that. There's always a place for an animal to shelter. There's always something for it to eat. And even the cattle eating leaves of trees or ivy off trees or munching in hedges and things like that, that's a whole other nutrient profile on top of pasture plants that a lot of animals never get to experience in their life, And then that feeds into the meat and feeds into humans, and And so I suppose the key takeaway is to create habitat for us, for livestock, for wildlife, is all the same thing. It's all about creating diversity on every level of life.
Yeah, the knock-on effect, though, is you have an enterprise and you're selling the meat, and
So we have a lot. Again, it comes back to me being kind of grumpy and stuff I don't like, just designing it out of the system. So when I took over the farm and we moved from being a small dairy farm into a small suckler farm, one of the hardest, quickest lessons I learned was that the kind of suckler beef system in Ireland it's really fluctuating. So the prices of beef and animals go up and down all the time, and you could work for the whole year. And the first year I worked really hard, tried to follow the real standard way of farming as well as I could and do everything really well to the textbook of what we were being taught in modern farming. I knew a lot of that wasn't wrong, and or wasn't what I wanted to do. But at the same time, I was curious to test it, and it all predictably, I suppose, didn't work out the way I would have liked it to. And the first time I went to sell animals in the mart, I got shafted, like completely. I came home, I basically didn't make any money after the whole year's work. And I was just like, there has to be a better way to do this. And there was a nicer community atmosphere within the organic trade.
I've been to one of the Knots events.
Right.
Yeah, it's a nice vibe.
There's a nice vibe, and everybody is trying to do things in a slightly different way, and there's a community of generosity and sharing those ideas. Help.
Everybody wants to see everyone do well there.
Yeah, and it's really nice. So that transfers into the sale yard there, whereas in the conventional one, it's there's dealers there buying stuff, and there's a lot of, you have to be in the know, and it's fine. It's just the way. But when I came into a green, I was like, I don't want anything to do with this, and it was daunting, and I was scared. So yeah, the organic thing kind of made that a bit easier, but at the same time, there was loads of variation that I couldn't control, and I met this fantastic organic farmer called Pat Lawler. He he has a business where he grows porridge oats, Kilbeggan porridge oats. But I was visiting his farm one time and we were having long chats, and there was one nugget of wisdom I took away from him, and it was like, stop worrying about what's outside the farm gate and focus on what you can control. And it's a brilliant point of view, because you can worry about world political problems and stress yourself out, and it's important to be aware and all those things, but all you can really do is change what you can change. That can affect change in so many obscure ways, like even being a working example that it's possible. Like I don't bang a drum, and I don't have a big social media presence where I'm trying to teach everyone or be a guru or anything. Just kind of get on with it and do it. And sometimes people are curious and want to do the same thing, and that's cool. And I'm quite happy that that's a really nice way to affect change rather than campaigning. Which is also, like, the diversity is good. It's good to do that too, but this is the approach I like. But
I think that's a better approach. People don't really want them banging in their ear.
They don't like to be told what to do. Yeah. So I found I started exploring the idea of direct selling. We had some sheep at the time, and that was actually, it was a nice little lesson, because I just, like, a very tiny flock. There was like 5 to 3 ewes running around, and I used to introduce a ram, and we'd have lambs and everything else, and I never went near them. They were really hardy mountainy breed, and they used to run the farm like a wild. There's some really used to keep an eye on them, make sure they were healthy and safe and everything else. But and they were such a small.
Would you have the whole land open, kind of?
Yeah, you see, the cattle would be very tightly managed under electric fence, but the sheep could run under. So it was a single strand of electric fence.
But all through the 120 acres?
Well, not quite. There's roads and stuff. So about 70 they had a roam.
Jesus, big room.
Yeah. So they had a very small impact. Now I've since got rid of them, because they do impact my winter grazing, so I don't use them. But they were a cool lesson, because I used to just take them in once a year for weaning. I used to castrate the lambs, and we'd take, twice a year, and then I'd take them away for the factory or the abattoir. And I started selling those we have a fantastic abattoir in North Sligo and Grange, Burns Meats, and they used to take the lamb and process it whatever way I wanted. So they'd break it down, and I used to sell a lamb box, and that was, keep it really simple. That's all we sold. You can't buy a leg of lamb. You can't buy chops off me. I sell a lamb box. And if you want a lamb box, you can have it any way you like. You can have a full box of mince, or you can have chops, or one leg or 2 leg, whatever. And so I started doing that, and we only had 10, 12 lambs. So it was 10, 12 customers, mostly friends and neighbors. And we did that for a few years. And, like, I used to make a couple of grand at this little exercise. And it was 2 days' work of cattle or sheep running wild on the farm. It's like, there's a lesson there, like the really, really low input system. The landscape was diverse enough that they were able to survive on their own without any input from me, pretty much. And that became the thing where if I focus on creating that habitat, rather than trying to instill a farming system as such, and allow a lot of the things to happen on their own, then my input is getting lower and lower and lower. The financial input is lower and lower and lower. And I'm creating a premium product, a really beautiful, diverse, healthy meat. And the return level on that is quite big. So the amount of animals I have to have is a little bit lower, and it just kind of all fitted and worked. And so from the lamb system, I had about 10, 12 customers, and I was talking to the abattoir about how could we do this with the beef animal. And between the two of us, we developed this beef box, which is essentially a tenth of an animal. So it's about the same size or quantity of meat as a lamb, about 20 kilos. And so we'd break the animal down into 10, sometimes it's 11, 12 boxes. But I was aiming for a type of animal that would thrive on the land and finish out at a weight that I could get this. And this model kind of developed, and it became really good, like it just worked. And the abattoir were breaking the animal down, and every box was relatively even. And I just sold them. That's my sole product, and that's all we sell now. 20-kilo beef box. There's no variation. It's very simple output to manage, and there's enough custom that people just want it and are really happy with it. Certain type of customer, you're not pleasing everybody, but there's enough people that want that. That's all we sell. So it's a really nice, tight business model.
Yeah, very good. Well, I've no doubt that there is a market for that. You know, people are prepared to pay for premium food. And I'm going to say premium, but like natural food. Do you know what I mean? I am kind of one of them. It's not as easily got. Do you know what I mean? But I hope that it becomes more available.
Yeah, logic would suggest that it should, but I think again it's tradition and false tradition maybe that we a lot of farming practice has been pushed in another way. But yeah, it works. It's cool.
Good. Clive, it's been a pleasure having you on today.
It's been nice to be able to waffle. Have someone pretend to listen.
I could chat to you for a lot longer. Let me tell you, I really could. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
If people want to reach out.
Yeah, we have a website, Rare Ruminair. That's the business name, rareruminair.com, and all my details are on that. I'm primarily on Instagram under the same tag. And yeah, that's the best way.
If someone was interested in following what you do, is that something you're open to sharing information on?
Yeah.
If they're looking for a few tips.
Oh, totally. Yeah, anytime. Yeah, cool. My number is on the website.
So
you can email me through that too.
Good stuff. Thank you, Clive.
Right. Thanks.
Good.